my friend, Graham Shanks, turned out to be a real professor. I know that because he goes to lunch at Melbourne University. He's got a cardigan and a pipe that he plays. Recently retired, he tells me, but gets junkets to Ireland and stuff like that. But as a professor of information systems at the University of Melbourne, very strange for you. You're a local lad from Hampton, played for Hampton Rovers. How can you get to Melbourne University if you want that? They wink a lot there, you know. Oh, prior to becoming an academic, Graham worked in the real world and worked for several organisations. I don't like to put him down, but you know, but then he decided to join the other side and did very well at that. You know, developing information systems and really teaching our younger people and keeping our world going through that phase of the information systems that you spoke about, Duncan, and who knows where we're going to next. I'm not going to try and praise you what Graham's going to tell us, but I'll leave him to you and see what dim dark secrets he really knows about all you guys. Over to you, Graham.
I wasn't sure quite what to expect, but there's so many people here from Victoria Golf Club and the bike riders, and there's a crowd at the back of hecklers, and so I'm feeling very much at home. One of the reasons that these notes are from the Rivoli Hotel, I was there a few weeks back, I found out on that trip the title of the talk, and I think Keith, I think it was you that might have made up Big Data, Big Brother, which I thought is very appropriate. So so the talk's about big data, which has interested me for 30 years and keeps me awake as much as outboard motors. It's something I enjoy very much, and I think it's really important. Okay. Can you hear me at the background?
Yes,
in fact, I think in my career, over about 30 years, we've gone through an amazing transformation with IT in general. And I think we're in the middle of another transformation now in the last 3 or 4 years and heading onwards in this big data. I think there's some really important things going on that are perhaps going on underneath our radar. So I want to talk a little bit about what it is and where we're heading. Now, a lot of it's to do with this social media, and interestingly, I had a look at 1984, which is the book by George Orwell, where Big Brother is originated, and it turns out it's the 70th anniversary of that book at the moment. And you may have had to read it at school. I think I was forced to read it. One of the main characters is Winston Smith, and his job was to rewrite history in the Ministry of Truth. And in that book, they coined terms, or George Orwell coined the term enemy of the people, and a number of other things. Now, interestingly, one of the great users of social media these days on Twitter is Donald Trump. And one of his tweets 1 or 2 years ago, to paraphrase it, the mainstream media are corrupt and fake and are truly the enemy of the people. So the enemy of the people has been adopted by Donald Trump in his tweets about what's going on. I think there's a bit of a message there. For example, at his inauguration, some of you might remember there was a fairly small crowd in the photograph, but his press people said this was the biggest inauguration crowd in history. And when quizzed about it, Kellyanne Conway said, "We have alternative facts." Some of you may have remembered the alternative facts phrase, and that's very similar to George Orwell's doublethink. So I think actually the title Big Data, Big Brother, it kind of fits really well.
Switched on.
It's off, isn't it?
Systems don't work.
Okay. Did you cause that to happen? Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is what it is, and I'm really unsure of what you think of big data or how much you know about it or care about it, but I'll tell you what it is, how it's collected, which is really interesting in itself. When you see young people walk around the streets, in particular the centre of Melbourne, looking at their mobile phone, this is the source of a lot of the big data that's going on, so maybe not so much us. How it's used, and it's used for a number of incredibly good things, but also what are the implications, and there's some really important ones for individuals and for companies and for society overall. And there's a book that's come out 2 months ago, which I think is very important. It says we're drifting from what we think is the traditional capitalism, that's worked so well for many years, into what's called surveillance capitalism, a real shift. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and you can make your own minds up about whether that's just a popular kind of book or whether it's really important. Can we shift forward? So what it is the collection, storage and analysis and use of insights. Now, that's a lot. It's not just the data. So it's what it is, where it comes from, and the fact that it's so big. A lot of you would have worked in industry with databases, accounting systems, sales systems and so on. We call it structured data because there's fields, particular amounts and so on that you can aggregate in your programs and what have you. That's a very small part of big data. What is dominant and what is just massive is this so-called unstructured stuff. All the text, the messages, anything that's out there in this so-called social media world. And it's just massive. There's incredible technology behind it. Just these companies, Google, Facebook and so on, are wealthier than countries. And they're hiring all the bright ones that come out, and they've got amazing technologies. But what I'm much more interested in is really how that's used, the consequences and the implications of it for us. There are a huge number of benefits. It's actually really good at many, many things. It's addictive as well. But I think there are a few hidden problems too. So, for example, the two pictures there, the one on the right, it doesn't much matter what a zettabyte is, but you get an idea of just how much data there is and how by 2020 it's kind of almost doubling every year. The storage devices for this are incredible and use enormous amounts of power and so on, but the data is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The picture on the left is the output of an algorithm that analyses text and just says what are people communicating about online. And data, analytics, big data, business intelligence and so on. These are all the key words that you're hearing more and more and more of. This is popular and a really important topic. That's the kind of report you can get to help visualise what big data is all about. Another slide. So what is it? Second slide. Where do we get it? Certainly from companies, but it's from what people are doing. And you can say it's harvested in a way, because often people don't realise it's happening. All of us, how many people have a smartphone with them? You've probably got applications on that, all sorts of apps. You've got Google search, maybe Facebook, WhatsApp, Tinder.
Tinder? You promised me he was going to talk about Tinder.
I don't know anything about Tinder. Those things are actively working just as we sit here. They know your location. There's even some evidence that some of those can use the microphone and the camera while you're not using them. It's harvested. The reason they can do that, by the way, is that every time you get an app or use one of those things on your phone, you've agreed to it with the terms and conditions when you consent, which nobody ever reads. Anyway, that data has created a whole new industry in the last few years where the companies that collect it, aggregate it, bring it together. They can re-identify people when they do that, by the way. If you think that the data is anonymous, really may not be. And it's on sold. So companies like Google and Facebook are ostensibly search companies and social media companies, but they're actually data companies. They sell advertising and they sell data and they sell insights about people. What's also come of age is artificial intelligence. So I've been in the game about 30 years, and I know 30 years ago they were selling that artificial intelligence is here. And there's been a couple of what they call AI winters where it's just gone off the radar because it's oversold. But there's a lot of stuff happening now that's really quite mature. And they're used to profile us. There's quite a lot of evidence that they know more about us than we do. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, how Facebook has psychologically profiled all the people who use it and can predict the way they're going to behave. They can also target their advertising extremely effectively at individuals. And they can influence, they can change the way we behave and think even. There's some evidence, I don't know if you've read about the Trump election, the Brexit election. I'm not even sure about our most recent election, but these days they can target individuals with messages that can influence how they think, feel and behave. Okay, so where is it collected from? As I said, traditional databases that are used by big companies and governments and so on, that's structured. The major collector of this is Google. Now, Google's a search engine, ostensibly, but it collects data from about 80% of all the other applications in the world that you might have loaded onto your phone through agreements. So Google is such a big company, it's probably more valuable in quite a few countries. I'll talk a little more about some of the others in the next few slides. Social media. Does anybody here use Facebook? WhatsApp?
Yeah.
Yeah. WhatsApp, I don't use Facebook because of this stuff, but don't worry. But I use WhatsApp, and Facebook own WhatsApp. so I might as well have been using Facebook, I think. These are examples of what we call social media, and these are systems where the content is provided by all of us. So they provide an infrastructure and we provide the content. Online applications that are dedicated to community-based input, yep. Interaction and sharing of content. Now there's all sorts of systems that fit that. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. So I found a little cartoon there that says, that kind of characterises these things. Twitter. I'm eating a donut. So Twitter is that thing that you put very short, sharp messages on. Trump does it every night, and a lot of other people do, and then they get followers. So you can follow people. And a lot of the young ones are following people who might be fashion icons or sports icons or whatever, and they can get influenced by them, and of course those people then generate money through advertising. Facebook, you'd have a different kind of thing. I like donuts, so if you see an image, a picture or any content on Facebook, you can give it the thumbs up symbol and tell the world you like it. And people are doing that, and if you get 200, 300 people like what you put up there, you feel better. So this is what happens on Facebook. I have no idea what Foursquare is. Instagram is where you put photographs. So you put your photographs of your life as it's like some kind of diary. YouTube. People used YouTube? I think it's great. You get short videos, don't you? You can get people presenting. You can put this on YouTube. You can put lessons, all sorts of things. It's very good. And LinkedIn, the professional kind of network. So it would say, I've got skills including donut eating, so it's all about what you do and how you can maybe put yourself in the market for a job. All right. I should have said any questions along the way, just ask straight away. Now the other kind of place big data is collected is home assistance. Anybody seen one of those Amazon or little gadgets that you say, oh please turn the lights on? Or, yeah. So home assistants are sitting there passively? I don't think so. So we'll talk about those in a jiff. Obviously mobile phones, and they have on them Google and Facebook and so on, but they also have cameras, microphones and other devices which can collect this data. Sensors and cameras. I read on, saw on the news actually yesterday was that Darwin is getting a whole lot of cameras around the city. And Other cities have got these cameras. There's sensors on farms and so on that collecting data for water and what have you. So these are amazingly detailed, huge amounts of data can help in all sorts of ways. I don't know if anybody's wearing what's called a Fitbit. Yep, they can count your steps and other kinds of things.
Mm.
Is that connected to a system that reports how you're progressing and a database?
To account.
Yeah, I
To
can
account.
download it.
Yep.
So I see if I can find out how many steps I've done and
Yep.
comes up that together.
Yep, so not only do they know about our identities and so on, they also know about our fitness and our health.
Hmm.
So let's have a look at Google in a little bit of detail. It's a search engine, ostensibly. What does it know? It knows your location because all the time, well, at least the location of your mobile phone. All the time that phone's working, it's communicating with the nearest towers and so on, and they know exactly where you are. They can get a history of where you're going, how fast you're moving, what you're doing, and so on. I had a colleague at the uni who used to analyse actually Twitter data, and he could tell when somebody was tweeting going along the freeway because you know their location and you know exactly where they were while they were doing what they were doing. And so consequently, if you get a tweet that says, I'll be home a little late from work tonight, got to work back, and the location says you're actually at the pub or the golf club, we can work that out.
Is that house in here?
Could you tell us, you're talking about this being on your mobile phone, but Google is a search engine that's used on computers.
Yeah.
So if you use it on your computer, what does that tell Google?
That would tell Google that you're probably on a desktop computer because it's not moving.
Yeah.
But all the other kinds of things you do would be collecting data.
Only on your mobile phone though.
Anywhere
On your
that-
smartphone, right?
a smartphone, a desktop computer, a laptop, anything, a tablet, anything. Anything connected to the internet.
It knows you've got a computer and the location,
Yep.
of course, but it can't track you while you're away from the computer.
Very true. Absolutely. It only knows where the location of the device is.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, everything you've ever searched or deleted, and that is, there's functions within Google to delete the search history, but of course that's already been recorded, and any browsing that you've done. So this is kept forever. Your advertising profile, so they've got algorithms which are just programs or processes that can work out your profile, that is an understanding of what you are, based on your location, your gender, your age, your hobbies, your interests, your career, relationship status, your income. All of these things are known, and that creates a rather detailed profile where you get targeted advertising. And I'm sure you've had times when you've used Google and up comes an advertisement. I was looking at a trip to Vietnam the other day, and I've been getting advertisements for Vietnam holidays. Friends of mine say that they've been talking to friends about things, and all of a sudden advertisements come up on what they've been talking about. So Google's also got relationships with the companies that write and develop all those other apps that you might have on your phone. So the data that they collect is also collected through Google. If you're on Gmail, every email you've ever sent, and your YouTube history and so on. So all of this stuff is all stored by Google forever.
Brian, can I just ask a question? What about things like when you're doing online banking?
Yep.
How secure is that really?
Well, as far as I know, I do online banking with NetBank, CommBank, and I think it's encrypted thoroughly, so the detailed transactions they can't get to. So I think that's safe. Yesterday or today, actually in the news, it's very interesting. There's sadly there's that young Belgian boy missing in Byron Bay, and they're asking WhatsApp, can they please get the messages he sent? after you left the bottle shop when you went missing. This is very, very interesting to me because the users of WhatsApp know that the messages you send are encrypted. They can't, the content's encrypted. Now, if WhatsApp can unencrypt them, that's going to be an interesting revelation. So what did WhatsApp do? If they can do it, are they going to admit they can do it? I'm going to watch this unfold. Facebook. And here's a picture of very sincere Mark Zuckerberg apologising.
Just before you, while we're still on Google, what you've said about your location and it was my experience that all the shopping you do online is profiling you. So whether it's a supermarket or whatever, if you go online to that location, it will have a profile of you so that it will email you and tell you that they've got some of your favourites in.
Yeah, is that an email from the shop itself?
From the shopping.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Well,
Woolworths.
Yep. This is why, of course, they introduce loyalty schemes, right? You can, when you pay for your groceries as you leave, you can use your loyalty scheme card to collect points. As soon as you do that, they know who you are. If you don't do that, they're not sure who you are. So with the loyalty schemes, they can then collect your identity. They can collect exactly your basket of goods, and they've got your history. They know what you buy and so on. They also probably can compare you to other similar, profiled people and suggest you buy something else.
So it doesn't need a smartphone to get that information because
That's right.
they can get the information off your membership card.
Correct. Any device connected to the internet can collect data about you. Yeah. Now, Facebook, of course, is a social networking application. So this is where you connect into some kind of social network, like the image on the right says. It knows all the content you post, your text, your events, your photos, but also the likes. You know, when you say, I'm looking at somebody else's content from my network, I give it the thumbs up and it knows what you like. Your location history, your apps, and all the data from them. It can access the camera and the microphone on your smartphone. Now, interestingly, what Facebook did about 2 or 3 years ago, they asked for volunteers. They've got, as you know, countless millions of members. 80,000 people volunteered to do a psychological test. Psychologists have invented 5 dimensions of personalities. One of them is extrovert, introvert, for example. And they run a series of questions. They get then your psychological profile. So they did this for 80,000 volunteers. They then got about 40, 50,000 of those and tried to correlate it with the things they liked, right, from their Facebook data. They got strong correlations and they then predicted your personality type from what you like. Then they tested that against the other 30,000 volunteers and yes, it matched. So what that means is Facebook can determine your psychological profile without you completing a questionnaire. All right?
Well, that's saving a lot of problems now, though.
Just from what you like. All right? And if you read about Cambridge Analytica, that company, they got to about 200 million Facebook records or something. And based on the data of just what those people like, if there's enough of them, you've got to have about 200 likes, I think, they can determine your psychological profile, and then they can determine the kind of message that's going to make you get out of your seat and do something. Right? It's a personalised message. So the news back then was that Cambridge Analytica influenced the Brexit election and Trump's election significantly. Since then, there's been a few people saying, no, not as much as they told us. It was partly advertising there, how good they were. But I think it's certainly made some difference. Okay. Yeah.
Chris Graham, identity theft is such a big issue today.
Yep.
Now, I can't think of any better way to have your identity stolen than to be on Facebook, LinkedIn, all of these things, they're giving all this information about you.
Yep.
So if they can hack into the Pentagon, they can hack into all my information.
Yep.
So I try to give them this, I don't have any of this stuff.
Yep. Chris, I think that...
I'm a technological troglodyte, it's true, but I don't have any of that.
Well, I haven't got a Facebook account
I haven't.
because I'm afraid. But
way.
I tell you that
No way.
everybody under 40 would have one. And you've almost got to have one to participate in society these days. So the trouble is, they are so good in terms of what you can do as a person and connect and what have you. They're free. That people are not necessarily very good decision makers generally, and will just go for it. But I agree with you. Yeah.
Sorry to stop your flow, but the other thing about Google, they were having a dispute
Speak up,
with
Barry.
the USG. It's all right, I can call out. Barry Donaldson anyway, knows bugger all about computers. Hates using them. Anyway, Google must be a great assistance to our anti-terrorism authorities. Any of that would be. They would go, you know, they'd be culling through that all the time. But there was a dispute between Google and the defence authorities. They weren't happy about giving the information unless it was for a price, as I remember.
Yep.
Is that correct? Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, look, I don't know of that particular episode, so I'm not sure of the detail, but there's no doubt that these big data companies are assisting with security. The NSA in America and so on would have access to all this data. And in Australia, we've sort of strengthened those laws a lot in the last 5 years so that the government can access a lot of this stuff. Remember the metadata they can access? Yeah. But I'm not sure about that. It doesn't sound too good if Google wants money for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, these are the home assistants that I know that a lot of younger people have, and maybe some of us, I don't know. The Amazon Alexa and Google's Assistant, they respond to instructions, commands. I don't want to listen to this music. Turn the watering system on, please, and so on. Now, if they're responding commands, what are they doing all day long?
They listen.
They're listening. So what about all the other things that are said that they can access and record? So there's another source of big data that influences me. I don't have one of these things. We've probably covered all this. Metadata from calls. Who knows? Maybe content from calls as well. Certainly data from apps. Metadata, just quickly, is literally data about data. So if a metadata about a telephone call would be when it was made, where it was made, who it was made from, and who it was made to, how long it was, and so on. Now that is really valuable. You can learn a lot from that, learn what's in the content. Now, the many uses, I wanted to create a picture which explains why these things are so popular. The personalisation of services is remarkable. And I know I talked to my daughter who's 32 I think now, and she loves the personalised advertising. It saves her time and so on. All right? And the personalised messaging and so on. But the trouble is, if you get personalised news feeds, like a lot of people who use Facebook do, and in particular in America, what's happening is that your personalised news is basically targeted to you based on what you believe and think. So you're in a thought bubble. You're only getting one side of the story permanently, and it's reinforcing what you think. Or it's even manipulating you a little and moving you a little on what you think. So these personalised news feeds can be, rather, have a good side and a bad side. Improved search, incredible algorithms in Google, improving the search and anticipating what you want to know. Of course, targeted marketing for companies is fantastic, and the advertising is done on an auction system. I don't know if that's familiar. So that based on your profile, several companies might want to advertise to you when you're doing a search. And it's essentially an auction system that the one who's going to pay the most or is the most relevant would then get the spot. So Google makes an incredible amount from this advertising. It's extremely effective. Homeland security is, I think, what the question was about. There's incredible benefits from knowing what's going on amongst potential terrorists and what have you. Smart cities. We've got cameras, we've got monitors and sensors all over the place. We can detect and help with traffic flow in real time. We can tell individuals which is the best way to get from A to B rather well. I know when we're coming back from down the peninsula, we always look at the Google map because it's got the highways colour-coded, and they're bright red, I think it is, when there's a lot of cars there. And of course that's absolutely real time. That is all the mobile phones in the cars on that part of the freeway, and it's detecting they're going slowly.
Don't tell Dan, he might want to book us for using a mobile phone.
Trading analytics, there's an awful lot of this stuff goes on in share trading, and even to the point where they're running sentiment analysis, which is a way of trying to understand the sentiment in the text messages going around. And there might be some incredible negative sentiment about a particular company. Well, that's going to be triggered straight away. Let's have a closer look at that. Smarter healthcare. The access to data can be used for an amazing number of purposes, including clinical treatment when you're in the hospital. There's a lot of data about diseases, which this big data can be analysed to connect with correlations, what might cause them. It's not strict causality, it's correlation. There's aged care, there's sensors that can detect what's happening in an aged care situation. One of the most remarkable things I saw personally a couple of years ago was an avatar, which is basically a screen like that with an image of a computer-created person communicating to an audience like this. And they were doing it so well, the person talking was having a conversation, and the algorithms in that computer were responding as a human would, but with emotional content. Now I can see this being, I'm going to be sitting in a chair talking to an avatar in about 10 years' time, and not even knowing it's not my best friend. Probably is my best friend. I've talked about sentiment analysis. Fraud detection, again, they can do it very, very quickly with the access to a whole lot of data. Behaviour modification, as I've mentioned earlier with a few stories. So these are uses. I guess one thing I haven't said is that you participate so much easier in society. You've got a circle of friends you're communicating with easily, and sharing photographs and so on. It's remarkable. So I've talked a lot about that already. Google, search results are personalised, advertisements are personalised and auctioned. Now the thing I wanted to mention here though is that Google is really a data company. It certainly makes a lot of money from advertising, but it certainly is a collector of data and an aggregator of lots of sources of data and then on-selling it. So it trades data and also the insights about people. Now Facebook does that too. Its news feeds I've mentioned are personalised, so this has got good and bad things. You're getting news that might please you, but you only see a small part of the story that you already believe, or that they want you to believe. Facebook can psychologically profile people because they've done this work to even eliminate the need for a psychological questionnaire. It's more a big data company than a social network company. It trades data and insights about people. Now there's a bit of publicity about Mark Zuckerberg apologising for privacy breaches, and privacy is one of the real issues that we'll talk about a bit later on. If I've got time, how am I going?
10 minutes.
Thanks.
No question. Okay.
Now, an interesting anecdote, an interesting story about social media. I don't know if any of you have read at all about what's going on in China, mainland China. There's an app called WeChat, which is kind of like Google on steroids, if you like. You do your searching, you do your social networking, you do your payments, you do everything. So you can only imagine what data can be collected from that thing about the individuals in China. So it's a social media platform that's really required almost to participate in Chinese society, and data is collected about you. Now, the social credit is a scoring system for individuals. So each of China's 1.4 billion citizens, their aim is to have a social credit score for it. All right? By 2020, this should be completed. It's already going. They've got 200 million video cameras around that can do facial recognition and know where you are, even if your mobile phone's not in your pocket. There are several good examples you can read about if you do a Google search on this. One of them is, which I did, one of them is, if you've got high scores, there's case studies of people who get your VIP treatment at hotels. You get your loans, fast track to the best universities and jobs and so on, but if you happen to be a dissident or some other person who's behaved badly, got a low score, you can be banned from travel, barred from getting credit, certainly won't get a government job and so on. So this is an example of the surveillance state, all right? It's actually happening now in another society where the government can openly go ahead and endorse this and do it. It may explain why people in Hong Kong don't want to be part of it. The other word that I've used a bit is algorithms. Algorithms are these processes that a computer follows. Now, I know there's people in here working IT, Jeff, and others. When we 30 years ago used to work against data, we'd write programs with instructions in languages like COBOL and so on. Algorithms have moved on a lot from those days. Get to different types in a GIF. The algorithms can make decisions based on data, and they certainly can impact people. One of the things that is really unnerving at the moment, though, is they're so sophisticated and the way they work is said to be opaque, or you can't see it. You can't understand the set of processes that have led to the decision. It's not possible to explain it because it's the way it's generated. So let me give you a couple of examples of machine learning. The simpler kind of machine learning is where there's a person sitting between the input and the classification algorithm. So the person says, if it's a motor car we're looking at, let's look at these features. Its length, its width, the size of its motor, and so on. So the person's saying, let's look at this stuff. The machine then looks at those details and comes out with some output. This could be a car. Is this a car or not a car? All right? Now that's been going on for years and years and years. The very sophisticated classification systems are called neural networks, which try to mimic the human brain. There are a whole lot of nodes and links like it happens in our brain. Now, the more sophisticated so-called deep learning algorithm is where you just let that neural network loose. You don't give it any idea of what the features of the car are, it discovers them. Okay? Now, a neural network, as I said, is a very kind of complicated thing that can't then say to you, oh, if it ran against some input and decided that's a car, that's not a car, and you said, why did you decide that was a car? It can't tell you. Because the logic it used is deeply nested inside all of this technology. You just can't find it. Now, that is what's going on at the moment in a lot of the Google algorithms and other algorithms. Now, you can only imagine if you were working with these things, but you were responsible. How do you assume responsibility for the decision? So explaining the decisions can be impossible. This is a real, really important implication. It's a bit like in those autonomous cars, I think, Jeff, what's that? Tesla. Didn't one of them crash into a truck because its side was white and it couldn't? But I'm not exactly sure that Tesla's algorithm explained that, or whether the people who then investigated the accident found out why it might have happened. So, if you're looking at autonomous vehicles, there's all sorts of issues about the human side of that, with insurance and responsibility and so on. You know, the old problem of if you're driving along and there's three old people here and there's a young mother with the two babies here, and you're either going to have to kill one lot or the other. Which one would you steer the car at, and why? And then who's responsible if you're the driver, and so on. So let me just give an example before we go ahead. No, can we go back? I want to show you how interesting and clever these algorithms can be. There was a project in the Netherlands recently that you can also look up. It's called, I think, The Next Rembrandt. So that bank, ING, went in with Microsoft and Technical University of Delft and formed a partnership for 18 months. And what they did was the first kind of machine learning. All right, so they got people to say these are the characteristics of Rembrandt's paintings that are important. Like which way does the head face? How wide are the eyes? What's the ratio of the eye width to the length of this? And they had hundreds of these measures. Also the texture of the paint and so on. So after 18 months, they had a really good understanding in that computer of Rembrandt's paintings, and they got it to 3D print a new Rembrandt. They printed with something like 13 layers of ink, 148 million pixels, and there were 168,000 fragments from his existing 400 odd paintings. So, which one's generated by the computer?
Middle one.
Who thinks it's the middle one?
All of them.
Who thinks it's the right side?
It's the right one.
Who thinks it's the left side? It's the left side. I think it's incredible. It's amazing. They've picked out all of the features of Rembrandt's paintings that make it a Rembrandt and generated one that he didn't paint. So if they can do that with Rembrandt's paintings, imagine what they can do with the text data they've got about us, our messages we send, our buying behaviour and so on. I wanted to finish up with, however, a word of caution, and that is there's the next three slides are basically some research we did over the last 3 years, where we did what's called a Delphi study, and we asked a panel of 40 people. Half were academics, half were from industry, and there were some privacy commissioners and all sorts of people that knew about issues to do with big data. So these are the main problems that they identified for individuals, and the next slide's for organisations and companies, and the third slide's for societies overall. So firstly, privacy for individuals. Privacy is a very interesting issue, I think. We've given it away so easily with agreeing to use these apps and so on. But what we really need is control over the data that the organisations collect in some way. We need to be able to modify it when we think it's wrong. And we've got to really understand how it's used and have some influence on how organisations use it. It's 90% of people don't care. They don't care, and I think raising awareness might help that. In Europe, there's a thing called GDPR, what's that? General Data Protection Regulations, that's about 6-12 months old now, which has codified this as law. I think they're ahead of us and the US quite dramatically. I heard our Assistant Privacy Commissioner talk about a month ago, and she was saying that this model of individual consent is not working. There may be some other way of thinking about how we regulate this might need to be, and it could be a government-controlled regulation like in Europe. Trust. You've got to have confidence as an individual that when you are using the services of a company that they're going to do the right thing. That they're not going to take advantage of you with unsolicited emails, advertisements, promotional offers and so on, and that your data is secure and can't be used in ways you wouldn't want it to be used. That sounds pretty reasonable, but I'm sure each of us feels uneasy about what's going on, given the capabilities. Awareness. As I say, I think 90% of people do not care, and maybe happy going that way, but I'm still going to talk about it. Do individuals really understand and do they consent mindfully to this whole big data process? And lastly, choice. The so-called, the idea we're living in a free society is great, but I think there's something going on right now, a transformation. You have limited responses to your searches and to your news feeds and so on that are targeted to your profile and what they want you to see and think. That can be a problem if you are incorrectly profiled because there's data about you that isn't right, or the algorithm actually isn't doing what it should do as well as it should. And there's also gaming, where organisations are trying to influence your behaviour. So gaming means that they're getting you to, sending you stuff to do or think about and getting a response from you, which then will change what they send to you and so on. They're gaming, trying to find out what makes you do things. Right. So there's four for individuals. Now 4 for organisations. To be fair, organisations really are aware of this being important and trying to be ethical about it. Most of them. So data trading. Do organisations use personal data in ways that respects individuals' rights? Well, they care about it. So data sharing should be, however, transparent. Organisations that are trading your data and on-selling it should be open about what they're doing. The other problem with this, and it was recently some Australian medical data got released, which was anonymised, but people I work with in my department at Melbourne Uni straight away identified the individuals through aggregating that data with other data and re-identifying them. So you've got to be incredibly careful about, is data really anonymous, because it's almost impossible to make it so. So data trading, reputation, it's the opposite of trust in a way. Big organisations need to actually have a good reputation in the use of aggregated data and so on. And use that to develop some kind of ethical culture within them so they do the right thing. Data quality. Data quality is always difficult, even with structured, simple data, accounting data and so on. Imagine trying to understand the quality of data that's text and opinions and social media comments and what have you. It's different kind of data. It could be garbage, it might be good data. So we don't really know how to, I think, understand what data quality means in that context. The other thing is when data is aggregated, joined together from 4 or 5 different sources, it's very possible that each of the data that was separate out there had a different meaning or was in a different context or purpose. You bring it together and you lose all that, and you could have a profile that is going to lead you to the wrong decisions. The last one, algorithmic decision making. Are these things reliable when we can't really understand how they work? The most sophisticated of them. Explanations are crucial. There's a lot of people at the unis working on how you can explain these things instantly. The other thing is, when you think about it, a lot of these algorithms that are trying to profile and make decisions are using historical data. Right? A good example of what can go wrong, in America they had a system algorithm worked on decisions to give people parole from prisons over the last 10 years. So the algorithm chugged away and got the set of rules and started applying it to current prisoners up for parole. And none of the African Americans got parole. All right? So what the historical data embeds is all our biases and discriminations. So it's not a simple matter of using historical data to work out the way forward. And the last point about algorithms is just human responsibility. How can they take it when they don't really understand it? So at the society level, I think power imbalance is the big one, where there are groups that would seem to have enormous power and influence, such as the Googles and the Facebooks and so on. And individuals are just really unaware of what's perhaps going on. And this is an imbalance that can be used unfairly. Principles and guidelines, do they exist? They certainly do in Europe, and we've got Australian privacy principles at work, here. I think in America they're a little bit laxer. Interestingly, Europe has just released a set of principles and guidelines for artificial intelligence, ethical use of artificial intelligence, which talks about how that's got to involve humans and so on. And that the next step for that will be law. So in Europe, this is happening, and Europe's ahead of the game. Surveillance. There's incredible technology foundation for surveillance. To what extent are governments observing, monitoring, measuring and profiling us? And lastly, coercion, we call it, and that is, to what extent can people actually participate in society without doing this? And they can't in China. And I would say a lot of the young ones here can't. It's addictive, and it's important to be part of the peer group. Right, so that's yeah.
Could you comment on the implications for whether or not data is held by or controlled by private organisations such as Google or governments such as China?
Yep. Well, clearly both, and our government no doubt has an awful lot of data about us too, but I think what Google and Facebook have dwarfs what our governments would have. But what's happening in China is almost like a government Google. There's a company that, I think it's called Tencent, or there's a company that developed that app in China that's the 10th biggest company on earth. Where do we go?
No, you don't got to go. I'm just prompting.
There's 2 slides. Can I have 2?
Yeah. No more questions until Graham winds up. Barry, can we leave?
All of this quantity of data.
Barry, can we leave?
I'll sit down.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it after.
Oh, yeah,
So, just to finish up, there's a really interesting book that's come out. This is a Harvard University professor, Shoshana Zuboff. She wrote a book 30 years ago that said, we're not just going to automate companies, we're also going to collect data about those processes we're automating, and we're going to informate it. And she was right back then. Now she's saying we're shifting into what's called surveillance capitalism. We're entering a new era with a shift from managerial capitalism, which works so well, into this surveillance capitalism. Google invented it, and the entire book must have gone through lawyers because it's got detailed explanations of exactly how Google's evolved all its capabilities, and it perfected it. The thing about this capitalism is that our behavioural experience is being translated into data. That's where the value is. That data is used to predict and influence what we do. And as a result of that, we're losing this choice, this freedom, and we're being manipulated through this. And she is adamant democracy itself's under threat through these kinds of influencing processes. It's a huge book, there's a lot more in it, but that'll do for a summary. So really, it's here now. It's got many benefits, and a lot of it's free, so it's widely used, but there are ways that they make money. Awareness, I think, is pretty low. I don't want to create a negative image because there's so many positives as well, but you've got to have a balanced view of it. And we could be in the middle of a transformation that we can't turn back anymore. I think we need to act to get more aware of it and to follow Europe a bit and get some regulations and laws in place. So, thanks for listening.
You've got me frightened witless. I do have a question, if I may. Our government seems to be, and other governments seem to be pushing back against Huawei as a information company.
Yep.
Hasn't the boat already left the shore? Yeah.
How do you say that? Hawaii?
I don't know.
Huawei.
Huawei. What's close?
I think they're pushing back against Huawei because they believe that nested inside the hardware for the 5G system is surveillance capabilities. I think that's why they're doing it. The WeChat system in China is much more of a kind of a data collector, but Huawei is problematic because of that surveillance, spying kind of capability from China to other societies.
Thanks, Graham. I don't want to give those guys too many opportunities to ask you questions because next month I'm going to ask them questions about your presentation. See if they've gone to the website, Jeff, to really see what's there. But I'll take 2 questions. Up the back there.
Fractures off.
Some of us in the room are old enough to have learned at school to write with slate pencil upon a slate. And they were disposed of in about 1938. So we've seen the advances, and we thought that the pocket calculator was the last word forever. Now we almost have to accept today's technology, as you hinted, to participate in today's society, but it scares the daylights out of some of us, and we feel almost bullied. Is it realistic to even think that we can live outside of this?
Probably not. My wife's brother lives on a little farm at Archie's Creek just outside Bonplanking. He doesn't have the internet, doesn't have a mobile phone, and he still has a savings passbook. So here's an example of somebody who lives outside of all this. The downside of that is I think he doesn't connect too well with his kids who are up in Melbourne. You can imagine how wonderful it is with video conferencing, WhatsApp and all that. He's missing an enormous amount. So you can do it, but I think there's a coercion there. You really can benefit from this stuff if you use it carefully. So I don't know if that answers the question.
I will get to you, Barry. I haven't forgotten about you, but Graham?
I'm just with the sophisticated intelligence collection that we see and you are outlining, I find it difficult to understand why the sampling was necessary to decide what's going to happen in our election without being in any way biased either way. But they just don't seem to be able to get it right, because either the exit polls or the polls during the period, they were just absolutely wrong. And I believe in other parts of the world the same thing has happened.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us something?
Yeah, I don't know all the answer to that, but I did read somewhere that I think some of these polls are done on lists based on landline telephones. That's just going to be completely non-representative of the population. I've done a lot of survey research, and one of the hardest things of all is to get a sample that's representing the population. And from a landline telephone list, you're not going to get it. Exit polls, I don't know. People often, maybe people say one thing and have done another. So the polls were horrific, but not surprisingly, that's the way they sample.
They then have to remember which box they ticked on that sheet. We'll give Barry a chance. Quick question, Beth.
All these organisations pumping out all this data want to do it at the fastest speeds possible, which gets back to the chip. There's a fight going on between Silicon Valley and China with the size of the chip. And I heard one Chinese authority say, we're very close to developing a 65G chip. Your comments?
Well, it's been going on, hasn't it, for 30, 40 years, and there's a lot of research going on in what's called quantum computing. And I think one of the Australian of the Year last year, a lady from Sydney, who was doing that, and that's going to be literally another leap in size and capability. So it's just going to get faster and faster and faster. The other point you made, I think, was the race between China and the US.
Silicon Valley,
Yeah, there's certainly, that's more important than any kind of tariffs, I think. Who's going to win that one? Who's going to win the actual artificial intelligence war, if you want to? So
defence.
Who are you pointing to, Johnny?
Bob.
Bob Toogood? Are you saying that I'm out of love with Siri now, eh?
I'm not sure what you say to Siri.
I'm not sure what I say to Siri either, but she's going to go under the bed now instead of alongside. Bob, could you come Sorry, Siri. Oh, come to life too. Not my phone.
Siri off years ago.